The night air was heavy, with the scent of spilled champagne and extinguished fireworks. A woman in a shimmering dress stumbled barefoot down the roadside, heels dangling from her fingers, mascara streaking her cheeks. Her designer clutch was nowhere to be seen. The limousine had long disappeared. No signal. No friends. Just silence. A mile away, a janitor sweeping out the back alley of the Crystal Mirage Hotel caught a flicker of movement beyond the gate. He paused, gripping his broom. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not this late. But extra hours meant extra cash, and tonight's mess meant overtime. The woman, glittering like a fallen star, staggered toward the alley light. He blinked. She didn't belong in this neighborhood. She didn't belong in his world. She whispered, "Can you help me?" The janitor's hand trembled slightly. Not out of fear, but disbelief. No name. No reason. Just desperation in her voice and emptiness in her eyes. The moon cast long shadows between them. He stepped forward slowly and said, "You lost." She leaned on the cold brick wall, legs barely steady. Her voice cracked like dry leaves. "I just need to get home." He scanned her face. Something about her looked familiar, but the grime of the alley distorted reality. The janitor looked down the street, deserted except for a blinking traffic light. "There's no buses now, and I don't have a phone," he said. She closed her eyes and let out a breath that trembled. "I lost everything tonight." Her hands were shaking, and so was he, though he'd never admit it. He hesitated, then removed his hoodie and offered it silently. She looked at him, stunned. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "'Cause no one else is." Minutes passed in silence. The city hummed in the distance. "Name?" he asked finally. She hesitated. "It's Sara." He raised an eyebrow. "No last name? Tonight, just Sara." He nodded. "I'm Ilyas." She whispered, "Thanks, Ilyas." For a moment, their eyes locked, strangers bonded by fragility. Then she broke the gaze, scanning the street. There was a car. A black one. I don't remember where it went. Ilyas tilted his head. "Did someone leave you?" Her expression hardened. "They didn't notice I left." He said nothing. Instead, he looked at the broken heel of her shoe and the dried blood on her ankle. She cradled the hoodie like a fragile relic, its warmth unfamiliar. "You always this kind?" she asked. Ilyas chuckled dryly. "Not really. Just tired of walking past people like ghosts." She looked up. "What do you mean? People don't see us. Not really. Just uniforms. Just noise." Her face fell. For a woman dressed in wealth, this wasn't her world. "I see you," she said softly. And he believed her. Not out of flattery, but because her voice was so bare. "Well," he said, standing slowly, "let's find you somewhere safe." Her breath caught. "You're not leaving me." He shook his head. "Nah, you've had enough of that tonight." They walked quietly down the street, the woman limping slightly, the janitor matching her pace. Her silver dress sparkled faintly with each step under streetlights. "This city's a mess," she murmured. "So are its people," he replied. There was no bitterness, only truth. "Why were you working so late?" she asked. "Needed the money," Ilyas said. "Rent doesn't care about sleep." She gave a soft laugh that dissolved quickly. "I used to think my world was hard, but maybe I never looked beyond the windows of my car." Ilyas smiled. "Well, you're seeing it now." The diner sat like a faded postcard on the edge of the city, its neon sign humming faintly against the early morning sky. Ilyas pushed open the glass door, holding it for Sara. Inside, the booths were empty, the smell of coffee and fried eggs hanging in the air. The waitress glanced at Sara's sequin dress, then at Ilyas's uniform, and said nothing. They took a booth in the back. "You sure you don't want to go to the police?" Ilyas asked. Sara stirred her coffee slowly. "No cops. Not yet." He didn't push. Instead, he watched her hands, small, delicate, trembling as she sipped. "You're not just some party girl," he said. She looked up, eyes glassy. "And you're not just a janitor." They shared a silence that said too much, too soon. The coffee steamed between them, untouched. Sara leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I wasn't supposed to be at that party," she whispered. Ilyas raised an eyebrow. "Gate crashing a billionaire's ball?" She shook her head. "I was invited, but I left without saying goodbye. And now I'm here." Her voice cracked again. He didn't even notice. Ilyas folded his arms. "You mean your boyfriend?" She nodded barely. "Fiancé. Was." He leaned back. "Ouch." She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of his hoodie. "He owns half the city, but not enough space in his life for me." Ilyas tilted his head. "Sounds like you're lucky to be free." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Freedom's cold when you're alone." A plate of toast sat untouched as Ilyas leaned in, voice lower. "So where do you go now?" Sara stared at her reflection in the coffee. "Anywhere that's not his penthouse." She pulled a small silver keycard from her purse, then tossed it onto the table like it stung her fingers. "You ever feel like a guest in your own life?" Ilyas nodded slowly. "Every day, cleaning up after people who don't even see you." She looked at him. "Maybe that's why I noticed you. You see things most people miss." Ilyas smiled faintly. "Or maybe I was just in the wrong alley at the right time." She chuckled softly, a trace of something warmer than before. "Right for me, maybe." Sara stood outside the diner, the morning sun creeping above the skyline, painting gold across the cracked pavement. She squinted up at it, wrapping the hoodie tighter around her. Ilyas emerged behind her, hands in his pockets. "I've got a place," he said hesitantly. "Not much, couch and kettle. But it's dry." She turned to him, lips parted in disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" He shrugged. "Because I've been where you are. Not dressed like that, but still lost." Her face softened. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Ilyas nodded toward the rising sun. "Then come find out. Somewhere no one's watching." Slowly, she nodded. Not out of trust, but out of need. The walk to Ilyas's apartment was quiet, each step echoing through the sleeping city. Rows of shuttered shops lined the streets, graffiti walls and flickering streetlights marking their path. His building was modest, chipped paint, rusted mailboxes, and a heavy metal door that groaned when opened. "It's not the Ritz," he said. She looked around the dim hallway. "It's more honest than any hotel I've stayed in." Upstairs, the apartment smelled like old books and detergent. A couch with a worn blanket, a small kitchen, a shelf filled with second-hand novels. "It's safe," he said, placing his keys down. Sara looked around and whispered, "It feels like a place you heal in." And for the first time that night, Ilyas didn't feel invisible. Morning filtered through the blinds like whispers. Sara awoke on the couch, tangled in the soft blanket, blinking at the unfamiliar ceiling. In the kitchen, Ilyas poured boiling water into 2 chipped mugs. "I made tea," he said quietly. "Figured coffee might be too much today." She sat up slowly, hair tousled, mascara faintly stained on her cheeks from the night before. "You didn't sleep?" He shook his head. "Didn't want you to wake up alone." That struck something in her. Not pity. Recognition. "You always this good to strangers?" she asked, taking the mug. "Only the ones who look like they've forgotten how to be seen," he replied. She smiled faintly, cradling the warmth. It had been years since someone made tea without asking for something in return. Later that morning, Sara sat at the small table, her silver dress draped over the back of a chair, now wearing Ilyas's oversized hoodie and pajama pants. "You ever think of leaving this city?" she asked, sipping tea. Ilyas leaned on the wall beside the window. "Every day, but leaving doesn't erase debts." She looked up. "Debts, not money, people, promises." There was a long pause. Then she said, "He proposed to me during a charity gala. In front of hundreds, cameras flashing. But I didn't say yes, I smiled. That was enough for him. Ilyas didn't flinch. That's not love. It was convenience, she whispered. Wrapped in glitter. He nodded. You deserve more than packaging. The door buzzed. Ilyas frowned. No one ever visits. He opened the door slightly, peering through. A suited man stood there, polished, impatient. I'm looking for Sara, he said sharply. Ilyas glanced back at her, frozen, pale. No one here by that name, Ilyas replied. The man frowned, handed over a card, and walked off. Sara exhaled, knees weak. That was one of his people, she said. Ilyas shut the door firmly. You don't have to go. She paced, hugging herself. They'll keep looking. He doesn't like being embarrassed. Ilyas met her gaze. You're not a scandal. You're a person. Her eyes watered. You say that like it means something. It does here, he said. As long as you stay. Sara sat on the floor by the bookshelf, fingering the spine of a worn novel. You read all of these? She asked. Ilyas crouched beside her. Some twice. It's cheaper than therapy. She picked one with a cracked cover. This one's in Urdu. He smiled. My mother's favorite. She left it with me. Sara turned the pages slowly. What? You keep things that matter. He nodded. Not much else stays. She looked at him then, not just at his face but into it. The quiet pain. The years of invisibility. You matter, she said softly. He didn't respond. But the way his eyes dropped and shoulders lifted slightly said everything. That night, they watched the city from the fire escape. The skyline shimmered under moonlight, alive with motion but far away. It's strange, Sara said. I was at the top of all this last night. Now I feel freer at the bottom. Ilyas leaned on the railing. Maybe because you're finally on ground that doesn't shift beneath you. She turned to him, brushing hair from her face. You don't know how much you've done for me. He smiled. You showed up. That was the hard part. A beat passed. Then she whispered, Can I stay? Just a little longer. He looked at her, then at the sky. You can stay as long as you want. The next morning arrived with quiet resolve. Sara swept the tiny apartment with rhythmic focus, wearing Ilyas's slippers and an apron far too big. Ilyas entered with groceries, raising an eyebrow. You trying to replace me? She smirked. Someone's got to take care of this castle. He set the bag down. That apron's older than my fridge. She tossed him a towel. Then, it's vintage. They shared a laugh that melted the chill between them. It wasn't domestic bliss. It was something gentler, a rhythm built on borrowed time and bruised hearts. Ilyas paused, watching her dance between shelves with a quiet energy. You look free, he said. She stopped. Maybe I am. For now. He smiled, unsure how long now could last. Later that day, Sara found an old laptop under a stack of magazines. Yours? She asked. Borrowed from a friend. Mostly dead. She plugged it in, screen flickering to life. You know code? He asked, surprised. No, but I know research. For the next hour, she combed through news, charity records, contracts. He's setting up a new business shell, she muttered. He's moving money offshore. In my name. Ilyas leaned in. You were listed? She nodded slowly. I was more than his fiancé. I was his liability buffer. Her hands clenched. I'm not running anymore. Ilyas placed a hand over hers. Then, we fight smart. And just like that, she wasn't the damsel. She was the storm. Sara stared at the documents she printed. Her name was on 3 offshore accounts and a holding company. He made me sign everything during parties. I thought it was PR material. Ilyas frowned. He's laundering money. Through you. Her lips tightened. And if I go public, I'll be the one in handcuffs. Ilyas leaned back. Unless someone listens before he does damage control. She looked at him, a spark igniting. What if I leak it anonymously? What if I take back my story? He nodded slowly. It's your voice. No one can steal that. She whispered. Then let's make sure he hears it loud. At a nearby cafe with free Wi-Fi, Sara uploaded files to a Whistleblower server under a pseudonym. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. You sure? Ilyas asked. She looked up. I've been silent too long. She clicked. A moment passed. Nothing. Then, upload complete. She leaned back, breath shaky but proud. If I vanish, promise me you won't go looking. Ilyas smiled tightly. Too late, already found you. She looked away, hiding tears. The air buzzed with fear and release. Outside, the city moved unaware, but inside that cafe, one woman just rewrote her ending. By nightfall, news broke across financial networks. Whistleblower exposes corporate laundering tied to socialite fiancé. Though names were redacted, the circles knew. Sara paced the apartment, phone off, heart pounding. They'll retaliate, she whispered. Ilyas stood at the window, watching shadows move in the alley. Let them try. She stopped. You don't even know me. Why stand in this fire? He turned. Because you finally lit yours. She walked to him, standing close. I'm scared, he replied. So stay close. Fires burn, but they also clear the way. And in that silence, fear became fuel. The next morning, Sara stood in front of a mirror, buttoning a borrowed blazer over a white tee. Her hair was tied back, her eyes sharp. You look like you own a company, Ilyas said, watching her from the kitchen. Maybe I will, she replied. She picked up a flash drive. These files, they prove the board knew. They didn't just look away. They built it. Ilyas nodded slowly. Then they'll fight to bury it, then I'll dig louder. Her voice held steel. I have a meeting with a journalist. Someone who doesn't owe them favors. Ilyas placed a protein bar into her bag. Eat. You'll need fire to fight fire. She smiled. I already lit the match. At a corner booth of a quiet co-working cafe, Sara sat opposite a woman in her 40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes, voice low. I've been waiting for this story, the journalist said. You understand what you're risking. Sara slid over the flash drive. I've already lost enough. The woman studied her, then nodded. We'll run it. Full coverage, they won't hide behind private equity anymore. Sara inhaled. I don't want revenge, I want them to stop. The journalist smiled grimly. Truth is louder than power, when spoken right. They shook hands. Sara's fingers didn't tremble this time. The article went live by afternoon. Sara sat beside Ilyas on the apartment floor, watching news feeds light up her phone. Board resignations. Regulatory action. Anonymous tip credited. It's spreading faster than I thought, she said. Ilyas glanced at the headlines. You took down a machine. I didn't think I could, she whispered. He had everything. Ilyas looked at her. Except a soul. That's what you had. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. Not this time. What if he finds me? She asked. Ilyas reached for her hand. Then he'll learn something money can't buy. What happens when a woman stops being silent? That evening, a black car idled outside the building. Sara spotted it through the blinds and froze. That's his driver. Ilyas moved beside her. He won't come up. How do you know? Because he doesn't get his hands dirty. She exhaled shakily. He wants to remind me he still sees me. Ilyas shut the blinds. Then, we show him, we see through him. Her hands clenched. I want to face him. Not yet, Ilyas said. Not until you decide the terms. She nodded slowly, her fear becoming fuel again. He took my name. I'm going to make sure it's the last thing he fears. Sara sat at the window, not hiding, watching. Her hands held a notepad, scribbling thoughts between sips of tea. You writing a book? Ilyas joked gently. A speech, she answered. The foundation I signed for, it's real. I'm going to rebuild it. But this time, it's mine. Ilyas sat beside her. What will you call it? She looked up. The second step sounds like a climb. No, she smiled. A beginning. They sat in silence, the kind that held peace, not emptiness. Below, the city moved like a machine, unaware that someone had just rewritten her blueprint. And beside her sat the man who helped her draw the first line. Days turned into quiet motion. Sara attended her first board meeting, not as someone's plus one, but as herself. The temporary foundation office was modest, but alive with intent. Ilyas helped unpack boxes as she rehearsed her opening. I keep thinking I'm out of place, she admitted. He looked up from untangling wires. Power always feels wrong at first when you've lived without it. She nodded, gripping the folder tightly. I want to make it right, not just loud. He smiled. Then speak with your scars, not your script. She paused. Will you be there, front row, he said. And for the first time, she walked into a room not to be seen, but to be heard. Sara stood behind the podium, voice clear. This foundation is not a gift from wealth, it's a reclamation from silence. The room of professionals leaned in. I was a name on someone else's deed. Today, I sign my own. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then building. Ilyas watched from the front row, pride in his eyes. Outside, a familiar figure waited in a black car. Her ex-fiancé, shielded by tinted glass. Sara saw him as she stepped out but didn't pause. No acknowledgement. No fear. Just forward motion. Because when the world tries to define you, walking past it becomes the loudest statement of all. That night, Ilyas sat alone on the fire escape, staring at the skyline. Sara joined him quietly. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Just wondering what it's like to see the city without fear. She looked ahead. Feels like breathing underwater for the first time. You don't trust it yet. He chuckled softly. You always talk in riddles. She smiled. Only when the truth's too big for one sentence. They sat there as wind rustled through the rusted railing. Two survivors, no longer hiding. You know, she said, I never asked what you wanted to be before all this. He looked up at the stars. Heard once you can build anything from the ground up. I'm starting with peace. Sara received a letter, handwritten, postmarked from a prison address. Her ex had been arrested after the leak led to deeper investigations. He says he wants to talk, she told Ilyas, holding the letter. Wants closure. Ilyas replied, closure doesn't mean going back, it means sealing the box. She stared at the envelope. He taught me how to perform, but you taught me how to stand still. He said nothing. He didn't need to. She walked over to the stove and tossed the letter in. The flames curled the paper into ash. That's closure, she said, turning away. They stood on the rooftop at dawn. Sara's foundation had received its first round of funding. A real team. A real mission. Ilyas had been offered a role as director of operations, his name finally beside a title. You ready for this? She asked, looking out at the sun slicing the sky. He nodded. Only, if we do it together. She turned to him, eyes full of what hadn't been said all this time. Then let's build something that outlasts both of us. Their fingers brushed, not in romance but solidarity. Two people from nowhere. Found by accident. Choosing to rise, not just for survival, but for purpose. Months later, the foundation launched its first initiative, rehousing workers displaced by redevelopment. Cameras flashed, hands were shaken, and Sara stood at the podium beside Ilyas. This isn't charity, she said. It's correction. It's overdue. She glanced at Ilyas, who managed logistics behind the scenes with quiet command. After the speeches, she found him near the equipment truck. You okay with all this attention? She asked. He shrugged. I'm used to cleaning up behind the curtains. This time, I just get to clean something that matters. She smiled. We're not fixing the world, but we're giving it fewer reasons to break. He nodded. One floorboard at a time. That evening, they returned to the diner where it all began. Same booth. Same hum of fluorescent lights. But this time Sara wore a clean blazer, and Ilyas no longer carried his broom. I used to think this place was rock bottom, she said, stirring her tea. Now it feels like the hinge. He looked around. Funny how places stay the same while we don't. She leaned back. I keep asking, what if I never walked into that alley? He smiled. You'd still be you, maybe just longer finding it. She tapped the table gently. Thank you for not walking away. He replied, thank you for stopping. Sara received a letter that morning, this time from a university board. They want me to speak, keynote, on transformation. Ilyas looked up from the couch. That's poetic. What would I even say, she asked. You'll figure it out on the stage, he said. Like always. She rehearsed in the mirror later, words faltering, then forming. I was someone's ornament. Now I'm my own blueprint. She paused. That sounds arrogant. Ilyas, watching from the hallway, shook his head. That sounds earned. She nodded slowly. Maybe it was time she stopped apologizing for surviving. The auditorium was filled. As Sara stepped up to the podium, her heart raced, but not from fear. From clarity. Not long ago, I lived in borrowed light, she began. But you can only reflect someone else's power for so long before you burn out. She told them about silence, about rescue, about dignity. Transformation isn't becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before they told you not to be. In the crowd, Ilyas sat beside students, eyes never leaving her. The applause rose like thunder. And this time, she didn't shy away from it. She let it echo, not for pride, but proof. After the applause faded, and lights dimmed, Sara and Ilyas stepped outside into the quiet night. She looked up at the stars, then at him. Strange, isn't it? She whispered. That all this began in the dark. He nodded. But now we walk through it with our eyes open. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small object, the broken heel from her party night. I kept this, she said, to remember the girl who finally stepped off the stage. Ilyas took it gently, then smiled. Then maybe it's time we build her something better to stand on. She laughed, a sound that filled the air. And for once, the night didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of everything.